What happens when the justice system, the very backbone of America's democracy, starts losing the trust of its people? Senator John Kennedy didn't tiptoe around that question. In a fiery exchange with Pam Bondi, he laid out a chilling warning: if Americans believe the Department of Justice is acting illegitimately, the entire system begins to crumble. And when the system crumbles, chaos follows. Protest in the streets, citizens ignoring laws, prosecutors turning into political hitmen. It's not just speculation, it's the logical next step of a government people no longer trust.
So smart and so powerful that he thought he could command the tides. So smart and so powerful and so rich that he would go to meetings with serious people like Bill Clinton, like Tony Blair, looking like a slob, looking like a fourth runner-up to a John Belushi lookalike contest. And he thought it was cute. Where's Mr. Bankman-Fried today?
I believe he is in prison, and I believe that's from the Netflix series I saw as well.
Mm-hmm. Because he's a crook. And who helped put him there?
The Department of Justice, Senator.
Can we agree that there's some really, really good men and women at the Department of Justice?
Many, many great men and women in the Justice Department, as well, Senator, as all the law enforcement agencies that fall within the Department of Justice. They're out there risking their lives, especially the law enforcement officers, every single day.
Can we agree, though, that there have been and may be today some bad people at the Department of Justice?
Yes, Senator.
We don't know for sure because for the last 4 years, the curtains there have been tightly drawn. But I think a minority of people there, have delegitimized America's criminal justice system. The most destabilizing act that I saw in the past 4 years, maybe in the history of the department, is when Attorney General Garland decided on the basis of dubious facts and untested legal theories to criminally prosecute a former president of the United States. And not only that, this is the special part. He decided to do it after the former president of the United States had announced that he was going to run against Attorney General Garland's boss, didn't he?
Senator, are you referring to going after a political opponent?
I think so. Now, this is one person's opinion. That kind of stupid takes a plan. And I say that because, number one, this is America. That had never happened before in America. That's the sort of thing that happens in a country whose Powerball jackpot is 287 chickens and a goat. It doesn't happen here. And I call it stupid because it broke the seal. It broke the seal. It normalized it. There are a lot of ambitious prosecutors in America, Democrat and Republican. And I'll bet you right now there's some prosecutor in a particular state thinking about, well, maybe I ought to file criminal charges against President Biden's inner circle for conspiring to conceal his mental decline. And that's the road we're headed down. And you've got to fix it, Counselor. You've got to fix it. And here's, in my judgment, what I would ask you to do. Find out who the bad guys are and the bad women and get rid of them. Find out who the good people are and lift them up. But do it on the basis of facts and evidence and fairness. Because the temptation of some people is going to be, they're going to tell you, look, two wrongs don't make a right, but they do make it even. Don't resist that temptation. Help us restore legitimacy to the Department of Justice.
Thank you, Senator.
Kennedy framed it in plain terms. Legitimacy isn't an abstract concept for law professors to debate. It's the glue holding everything together. Lose that glue and society starts to fall apart. But Kennedy didn't stop at theory. He pointed to real names, once powerful figures like Michael Avenatti and Sam Bankman-Fried, whose dramatic falls show both the strength and the fragility of American justice. And what he revealed next would send shockwaves across Washington. When Senator John Kennedy leaned in with his first line of questioning, he didn't start with scandals or courtroom drama. He began with a simple but powerful point: legitimacy. He pressed Pam Bondi to agree that the Department of Justice is more than just another agency. It's the institution Americans depend on to enforce laws fairly and without bias. If that legitimacy cracks, Kennedy argued, everything else begins to collapse. Because when people stop believing that the system is fair, they stop respecting its outcomes. And once the outcomes are seen as rigged, why would anyone follow the rules? Kennedy painted a stark picture of what happens next: chaos. Citizens ignoring laws, communities tearing at the seams, and the social contract itself, the unspoken agreement between the people and their government, completely shattered. Bondi agreed with him point by point, acknowledging that even a small group of bad actors within the department could undermine the reputation of thousands of good men and women working to uphold justice. This wasn't just legal theory, it was a warning shot. Kennedy was telling the country that legitimacy isn't an academic word, it's the lifeline of America's justice system, and without it, even the strongest institutions can unravel overnight. After laying out the stakes of legitimacy, Senator Kennedy wasted no time bringing up a name that once dominated cable news: Michael Avenatti. For a brief moment in Washington, Avenatti was everywhere. He was the lawyer who couldn't stay off television, strutting onto sets with the confidence of a celebrity. Reporters hailed him as a rising star, a voice who knew how to play to the cameras. He was bold, brash, and always ready with a soundbite. But as Kennedy reminded everyone, that glittering spotlight doesn't last forever. Today Avenatti isn't on CNN, he isn't a political darling, he's in prison, behind bars, stripped of the attention and power he once enjoyed. Kennedy's point was sharp: the justice system, when it works, still has the ability to cut through the noise and hold even the most media-saturated figures accountable. What makes Avenatti's downfall so striking isn't just the speed of his collapse, it's the reminder that no amount of fame or airtime can protect someone once the law finally catches up. Kennedy used his name as proof that even those who seem untouchable can fall, and fall hard. But this was only the beginning of his argument. Because there was another golden boy, whose empire collapsed even faster. From flashy lawyers to so-called financial geniuses, Senator Kennedy's next example hit just as hard. He turned the spotlight on Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto wunderkind once hailed as a visionary. Bankman-Fried wasn't just running a digital empire, he was rubbing shoulders with world leaders, giving speeches and convincing investors that he was the future of finance. With messy hair and an awkward style, he branded himself as the brilliant outsider too focused on saving the world to bother with appearances. For a while people bought it. Politicians lined up to meet him, celebrities endorsed him. He was everywhere, raising billions and basking in the glow of being Silicon Valley's latest boy genius. But beneath the hype, the cracks were spreading fast. When the truth finally came out, it wasn't brilliance, it was fraud. His empire collapsed overnight, billions vanished, and the same people who once praised him watched as he was led away in handcuffs. Kennedy's point was blunt: fame, money, and influence mean nothing when the law steps in. Bankman-Fried's story wasn't just about financial crime, it was about how quickly power can evaporate when legitimacy disappears. And Kennedy warned that while the justice system can strike hard, its credibility is fragile. If it becomes political, even victories like this lose their meaning. After highlighting the downfalls of Avenatti and Bankman-Fried, Senator Kennedy shifted to a much darker concern, the Department of Justice itself. On one hand, he acknowledged the department's incredible successes, locking up scammers, protecting ordinary Americans, and taking down criminals who believed they were untouchable. Those victories matter, and they show that the system can still serve its purpose when guided by facts and evidence. But Kennedy warned that this very same department risks throwing away its credibility when it mishandles politically charged cases. The problem, as he framed it, is the appearance of a double standard. People watch as certain figures are pursued aggressively while others seem to slip through the cracks untouched. When justice looks selective, it ceases to feel like justice at all. And that's when the damage begins, not in a courtroom, but in the hearts and minds of Americans who start believing the system is rigged. Kennedy argued that legitimacy doesn't crumble all at once, it erodes piece by piece. Each time the DOJ appears to bend under political pressure, each time it chooses to act on questionable grounds, it chips away at the trust built by the honest work of thousands of men and women in law enforcement. This was his warning: if the department becomes known less for blind justice and more for political maneuvering, then even its genuine victories, like putting fraudsters behind bars, are overshadowed. The very agency that is supposed to keep order would instead fuel division, and Kennedy stressed that once people lose faith, once the perception of fairness is gone, the system doesn't just look weaker, it becomes weaker, and restoring that trust becomes nearly impossible. Senator Kennedy didn't stop at pointing out double standards, he went further, issuing one of his starkest warnings. In his words, a seal had been broken. For generations America operated on an unspoken rule: political rivals fought at the ballot box, not in courtrooms. But when prosecutors cross that line, Kennedy argued, the consequences ripple far beyond one case. Once the precedent is set, ambitious prosecutors across the country suddenly see new opportunities. Why stop at one leader when the door is now open to target anyone who holds power? Kennedy suggested that the temptation to weaponize legal systems for partisan advantage is almost impossible to resist, and that temptation could push the United States into a dangerous cycle of retaliation. Imagine every new administration arriving with a fresh list of political enemies to investigate. Imagine the justice system transformed from a safeguard of fairness into a revolving battlefield for payback. The legitimacy of rulings, verdicts, and prosecutions would evaporate overnight, leaving citizens doubtful of every decision handed down by the courts. Kennedy's warning wasn't framed as speculation, it was framed as inevitability. Once that seal is broken, once the justice system becomes a tool of political warfare, there is no easy way back. Trust is fragile, and the risk of permanent damage grows with every partisan case. His point was chilling: what begins as one prosecution could spiral into endless vendettas that leave the rule of law unrecognizable. Kennedy then pivoted to an even more unsettling possibility: how a leader's visible decline could be twisted into a legal weapon. He suggested that in a hyper-partisan climate, ambitious prosecutors might seize on signs of weakness or missteps as grounds for investigation, turning health and judgment into political ammunition. What once might have been viewed as human frailty could suddenly be reframed as negligence, conspiracy, or even misconduct in office. The danger here isn't just about one individual, it's about the precedent it sets. If prosecutors start exploiting personal struggles for political gain, it normalizes the idea that any flaw, any lapse can be weaponized. This doesn't just target leaders, it undermines the very stability of government itself. Imagine the endless cycle: every administration hunting for vulnerabilities, every mistake transformed into a criminal charge. Kennedy's point was blunt: if justice is no longer tethered to evidence and fairness, but instead to political advantage, then the system itself is doomed. Using health or decline as a pretext for prosecutions doesn't strengthen democracy, it corrodes it. And once the public sees the law used this way, trust in government shatters even further. Kennedy's warning was clear: legitimacy can't survive in a system driven by vengeance. After laying out the risks of a justice system drifting into political warfare, Senator Kennedy turned his focus toward solutions. His message to Pam Bondi was direct: fixing the problem means separating the good actors from the bad. The Department of Justice is filled with thousands of men and women who put their lives on the line every day, working to keep communities safe. Their sacrifices should never be overshadowed by a handful of individuals who abuse power. Kennedy urged that fairness, not partisanship, must guide every decision. He acknowledged the temptation some people feel to fight fire with fire, to answer political attacks with equally political prosecutions, but in his view, that path only deepens the chaos. Two wrongs don't make a right, he said, warning that revenge politics doesn't restore trust, it only entrenches division. Instead, Kennedy pushed for a return to fundamentals, facts, evidence, and equal application of the law. By exposing corruption where it exists and elevating integrity where it thrives, the DOJ can begin to repair its standing. It won't happen overnight, but rebuilding legitimacy requires visible commitment to fairness. Kennedy's call was less about politics and more about survival, the survival of the justice system as a force Americans can still believe in. Senator Kennedy's fiery exchange with Pam Bondi wasn't just another hearing, it was a warning shot to the entire nation. His message was simple but urgent: once the justice system loses legitimacy, everything else starts to unravel. From media darlings like Michael Avenatti to financial titans like Sam Bankman-Fried, Kennedy showed how justice can still strike, but he also revealed how fragile that strike becomes if politics infects the process. The danger isn't one bad verdict or one flawed prosecution. The danger is a cycle where every side uses the law as a weapon, turning courtrooms into battlegrounds and citizens into skeptics. When people no longer believe the system is fair, the rule of law collapses under its own weight. Kennedy's call was clear: root out corruption, reward integrity, and return to the basics of fairness. Because without trust, the Department of Justice becomes just another political tool, and America cannot survive that. The question now is simple: can legitimacy be restored before the system breaks beyond repair?